When they reached the deep workings, 10 days after the explosion, many of the bodies there weren't burned. This was a mine explosion strong enough to throw the steel cage clear out of the pithead. An explosion that did that, and men deep in the same mine who died without a mark of fire on them. Those two facts don't fit. April 1942, Manchuria, under Japanese military occupation. The mine is called Benxihu, run by the Okura Combine. On the morning of the 26th, more than 4,000 people are underground. Chinese prisoners of war and conscripted civilians. 12-hour shifts. The empire needs coal, and down here, a man's life is priced to match. By the end of that day, around 1,500 of them are dead. It is still the worst disaster in the history of coal mining. How it actually happened is the part that gets shortened. Before the explosion, the thing that matters most is the air and how it moved. The ventilation wasn't built as separate circuits for separate districts. It was one long line. Fresh air came in at the intake, ran through the first section, and picked up heat, methane, and coal dust as it went. By the time that same current reached the far workings, it was carrying everything the sections in front of it had already put into it. The men near the intake breathed something close to clean air. The men at the deep end breathed what was left. And the system was running over its design. The ventilation had been laid out for roughly half the people actually working below. Quotas climbed, the recalculation never came. So in the deepest sections, where the air arrived already used up, methane collected, with no color, no smell, and no detectors at the faces to catch it. Stop on that, because it's the part most tellings rush past. The mine didn't become dangerous on the day it killed 1,500 people. It had been lethal for years, built that way by every safeguard that was never added. The undersized ventilation, the missing detectors, the untreated dust. Nobody ever decided to make it deadly. The danger was just left running, like the fans. The explosion didn't build the death trap. It walked into one that was already finished. Between roughly 5 and 15% concentration, methane becomes explosive, most violently at around 9.5. In those far corners, it had been climbing toward that range for hours. After that, it only needed a fault. Around 11:30, a fault at the surface substation cut power to the exhaust fans. By the best record we have, the mine sat without ventilation for about 2.5 hours. The air stopped. The methane kept building. No full evacuation was ordered. The men stayed at the faces. Around 2 in the afternoon, the power came back, and electricity went back down into the mine. Somewhere in the deep districts, in the post-war reconstructions, either a conveyor starter shorting on restart or a bare wire in a re-energized circuit, there was a spark. On its own, a methane blast would have wrecked a limited stretch of tunnel. What turned it into the worst mining disaster on record was on the walls. The basic dust suppression work, coating the tunnels in inert stone dust to stop a fire spreading, hadn't been done. Every surface down there held a film of fine coal dust. The methane blast lifted that dust into the air, and the dust caught too. Now the explosion wasn't sitting in one place. It traveled, feeding on what years of skipped maintenance had left on every wall, and drove the full force up the number 8 shaft. That's the blast that threw the cage clear of the pithead. At the center of it, death was immediate. But Benxihu wasn't a single chamber. Further out, in the deep districts, the explosion didn't arrive as fire. It came as a dull thud and a hard gust that blew the lamps out. A lot of the men there came through the first wave physically intact. In the dark, they started moving toward the haulage routes, toward anything that might lead up and out. Trapped, but alive, still expecting a way through. This is the stretch most accounts pass over, straight from the explosion to the final number. But the men in the deep workings didn't die in the explosion. They died in the hours after it, and those hours are the actual story. On the surface, management did the arithmetic. There was a fire underground. If it spread, it would take the coal seams and the equipment with it. The standard way to kill an underground fire is to cut off its oxygen, close the shafts, stop the fans. By itself, that's legitimate engineering. It's in the manuals, and in an ordinary mine fire, it works. At Benxihu, it was done before the men were out. The remaining fans were shut down. The shafts were sealed. The workers near the upper sections and the main portals, the ones who reached daylight first, got out. Everyone behind them was still inside, including the men in the deep workings, now sealed in with the fire's exhaust. Inside a sealed mine, the available oxygen burns off fast. What replaces it is the worst part of afterdamp, carbon monoxide. It doesn't need a flame. It binds in the blood ahead of oxygen and cuts off the supply to the brain. A man gets weak, sits down, loses consciousness, and doesn't come back. So in the deep workings, men who had survived the blast began dying in the dark, after a decision made on the surface. Being far enough from the epicenter to survive the explosion is exactly what placed you in the part of the mine the surface chose to seal. Living through the first minute is what got you killed in the next hour. Above ground, the electrified fence around the complex, already part of the camp, was used to hold families and local people back from the sealed pit. The fence had always been there. After the blast, it stood between the mine and the people trying to reach it. That brutality is real, and it's why so many men were under that mountain in the first place. But it doesn't explain the air. They were killed by a procedure. Close the fire, starve the oxygen. Carried out while the space it sealed still had living men in it. The post-war American technical report by Kirk Kamek, NRS number 29, the main Allied document on the disaster, and a separate Soviet commission reached the same point. The bodies from the deep workings showed little or no fire damage. They showed severe carbon monoxide poisoning. The spark didn't kill them. The closed shaft did. I want to be straight about where the evidence is solid and where it isn't. The exact ignition point, unknown. Who gave the order to seal, and whether a full evacuation was even still possible by then, contested, and probably staying that way. What isn't in doubt is the physical evidence. The carbon monoxide signatures on the bodies in the deep workings. The seal didn't kill everyone who died that day. It killed most of the men who died in the back of the mine. One more thing. I went looking for names. For one man out of those 1,500. In most of the record, there aren't any. The mine kept the coal, the reports kept the number, and almost nobody kept the men. The best supported figure is 1,549. The early Japanese reporting was censored and well short of it. A later memorial in stone gave 1,327, short of the real number by more than 200 people, erased from the count itself. Recovery took 10 days. The bodies were loaded into coal carts and tipped into mass trenches. Then the mine was ventilated, reopened, and put back to work. 72 years later. May 2014, the Soma mine in Turkey. A fire starts deep inside the workings. Most of the men below are nowhere near the flames. The fire is survivable. The air after it is not. When the smoke comes, hundreds follow the emergency instructions and move deeper, expecting clean air to be pumped to where they are. It doesn't reach them in time. Their masks are meant to buy them an hour, in some accounts, less. Carbon monoxide fills the galleries faster than the ventilation can clear it. Of the 301 who die, most die from that gas, not from burns. Soma is a different country and a different system, decades on. But the shape underneath is the same. The fire was survivable. What killed them was the air afterward. An emergency instruction that sent men deeper. Ventilation that couldn't shift the gas in time. A decision made above ground while the men below were still breathing. Here's the part I keep coming back to. It isn't the size of the blast, and it isn't the number. It's that in this whole story, from the first line drawn on the ventilation plan to the last command given on the surface, the men were never the subject of a single decision. The air was sized for output. The seal was about the coal and the machinery. The one decision that would have been about them, get them out, was the one that never came. They enter the record exactly once, at the very end, as a count. And even the count was shaved by 200. Down in the deep workings, second by second, the men were still turning air into time. Up on the surface, they had already become a line in a report nobody had written yet. That's the erasure that matters. Not the 200 missing from the stone, but the fact that the men were gone from the decisions long before they were gone from the mine. And here's what should sit with you. None of it was a crime. The procedure that sealed them is still correct, still in the manuals, still the right answer for a burning mine. The only thing standing between those pages and the next set of deep workings is whether someone, on some future surface, thinks to ask the question nobody asked here. Whether anyone is still alive inside before they close off the air.